Hello, folks. I don't know if there's anybody there. I didn't give a whole lot of time tonight, but I had just been watching this terrible webinar about bioelectronics, and I had meant to do some reading, and then I got distracted, and I'm like, no, I'm just going to stick with it. I really wanted to read again tonight, so I don't go to bed with the memory of these crazy electronic tattoo sensor things in my mind. So we're up to chapter 5. It's our book tonight. It's a Wrinkle in Time. We're at chapter 5, the tesseract. Just to go over a little bit of where we were the last couple of chapters. Meg and met Calvin out in the woods, and he came to dinner. So there was a chapter that was about Calvin at the house, and Calvin learning about her father, and them sort of going out in the garden and sort of reflecting on her father being missing and how bad she felt about it. And Calvin comforted her. And then towards the end of that, Charles Wallace came out and said, it's time to go. And so then Miss Wetsit came, and they were all sort of whisked up to this other world. Miss Wetsit actually turned into this winged centaur-like creature and carried them up to this beautiful world. And then eventually they had to go and encounter the black thing. And the black thing is this sort of shadow over the world. And they went up, 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 up to where they couldn't even breathe. And they had this special flower that they put on their nose, and that made them, able to breathe up in this very thin atmosphere on the top of this mountain. And they had to turn their backs to this dark shadow, and then this dark shadow blotted out all of the stars in the sky. And at the end of chapter 4, Meg says, she slid off Miss Wetsit's back and walked rather unsteadily after the long ride over to Ms. Witch. That dark thing we saw, she said, is that what Father is fighting? So that's how chapter 4 ends, and now we'll start the tesseract. Yes, Mrs. Witch said, he is behind the darkness, so that even we cannot see him. Meg began to cry, to sob aloud, and through her tears she could see Charles Wallace standing there, very small, very white. And Calvin put his arms around her, but she shuddered and broke away, sobbing wildly. And then she was enfolded in the great wings of Miss Wetsit, and she felt comfort and strength pouring through her. Mrs. Wetsit was not speaking aloud, and yet through the wings Meg understood words. My child, do not despair. Do you think we would have brought you here if there were no hope? We are asking you to do a difficult thing, but we are confident that you can do it. Your father needs help. He needs courage. And for his children, he may be able to do what he cannot do for himself. Now, Ms. Witch said, are we ready? And again, Meg felt an actual physical tingling of fear as Ms. Witch spoke. We must go behind the shadow. But we will not do it all at once, Ms. Wetsit comforted them. We will do it in short stages. She looked at Meg. Now we will tesser, and we will wrinkle again. Do you understand? No, said Meg flatly. Ms. Wetsit sighed. Explanations are not easy when they are about things for which your civilization has no words. Calvin talked about traveling at the speed of light. You understand that, little Meg? Well, yes, Meg nodded. Well, that, of course, is impractical, the impractical long way around. We have learned to take shortcuts wherever possible. Well, sort of like in math? Meg asked. Yes, like in math. Ms. Wetsit looked over at Mrs. Hu. Take your skirt and show them. La experiencia es la madre de la ciencia. Spanish, my dear Cervantes. Experience is the mother of knowledge. Mrs. Hu took a portion of her white robe in her hands and held it tight. You see, Ms. Whatsit said, if a very small insect were to move from the section of skirt in Mrs. Hu's right hand to that in her left, it would be a very long walk for him if he had to walk straight across. I'll show you the little picture. There they have a little ant. There's the straight across part, and then there's the bendy part. Swiftly, Ms. Hu brought her hands, still holding her skirt together. And now you see, Ms. Whatsit said, he could be there without that long trip, and that is how we travel. Charles Wallace accepted the explanation serenely. Even Calvin did not seem perturbed. Oh dear, Meg sighed. I guess I am a moron. I just don't get it. Well, that's because you think of space in only 3 dimensions. Mrs. Whatsit told her, we travel in the 5th dimension. Well, this is something you can understand, Meg. Don't be afraid to try. Was your mother able to explain a tesseract to you? Well, she never did, Meg said. She got so upset about it. Why, Mrs. Whatsit? She said it had something to do with her and father. Well, it was a concept they were playing with, Ms. Whatsit said, going beyond the 4th dimension to the 5th. Did your mother explain it to you, Charles? Well, yes. Charles looked a little embarrassed. But please don't be hurt, Meg. I just kept at her while you were at school till I got it out of her. Meg sighed. Okay, just explain it to me. Okay, Charles said. So what is the 1st dimension? Well, a line. A line. Yes. Well, and the 2nd dimension. Well, you'd square the line and a flat square would be the 2nd dimension. And the 3rd, well, you'd square the 2nd dimension and then the square wouldn't be flat anymore. It would have a bottom and sides and a top. And the 4th? Well, I guess if you want to put it into mathematical terms, you'd square the square, but you can't take a pencil and draw it the way you can the first 3. I just know it's got something to do with Einstein and time. I guess maybe you could call it the 4th dimension, time. Yes, that's right, Charles said. Good girl. Okay, then, for the 5th dimension, you'd square the 4th, wouldn't you? Well, I guess so. Well, the 5th dimension, that's a tesseract. You add that to the other 4 dimensions, and you can travel through space without having to go the long way around. In other words, to put it into Euclid or old-fashioned plane geometry, a straight line is not the shortest distance between 2 points. And for a brief, illuminating second, Meg's face had the listening, probing expression that was so often seen on Charles's. I see. I've got it. For a moment, I've got it. I can't possibly explain it now, but for a second, I saw it. And she turned excitedly to Calvin. Did you get it? He nodded. Enough. I don't understand it the way Charles Wallace does, but enough to get the idea. So now we must go, Ms. Witch said. There is not all the time in the world. Could we hold hands? Meg asked. Calvin took her hand and held it tightly in his. You can try, Ms. Whatsit said, though I'm not sure how it will work. You see, though we travel together, we travel alone. Well, we will go first and take you afterward in the backwash, and that may be easier for you. And as she spoke, the great white body began to waver, and the wings began to dissolve into mist, and Ms. Hu seemed to evaporate until there was nothing but the glasses, and then the glasses too disappeared, and it reminded her of the Cheshire Cat. I've often seen a face without glasses, she thought, but glasses without a face. I wonder if I go that way too. First me and then the glasses. She looked over at Mrs. Witch, and Mrs. Witch was there, and then she wasn't. There was a gust of wind and a great thrust and a sharp shattering, and she was shoved through what? Second, drink of water. Then darkness, silence, nothingness. If Calvin was holding her hand, she could not feel it. But this time she was prepared for the sudden and complete dissolution of her body. And when she felt the tingling coming back to her fingertips, she knew that this journey was almost over, and she could feel it again, the pressure of Calvin's hand about hers. And without warning, coming as a complete and unexpected shock, she felt a pressure she had never imagined, as though she were being completely flattened by an enormous steamroller. And this was far worse than the nothingness had been. And while there was nothing there was no need to breathe. But now her lungs were squeezed together, so that although she was dying for want of air, there was no way for her lungs to expand and contract to take in the air that she must have to stay alive. This was completely different from the thinning of atmosphere when they flew up to the mountain and she had to put the flower to her face to breathe. She tried to gasp, but a paper doll can't gasp, and she thought she was trying to think, but her flattened out mind was as unable to function as her lungs, and her thoughts were squashed along with the rest of her. Her heart tried to beat. It gave a knife-like sideways movement, but it could not expand. But then she seemed to hear a voice, or if not a voice, at least words. Words flattened out like printed words on paper. "Oh no, we can't stop here. This is a two-dimensional planet, and the children can't manage here." She was whizzed into nothingness again, and nothingness was wonderful. And she did not mind that she could not feel Calvin's hand, that she could not feel or be, and the relief from the intolerable pressure was all she needed. And then the tingling began to come back to her fingers and her toes, and she could feel Calvin holding her tightly, and her heart beat regularly. Blood coursed through her veins, and whatever had happened, whatever mistake had been made, it was over now. And she thought she heard Charles Wallace saying his words round and full as spoken words ought to be. "Really, Miss Witch, you might have killed us." And then she was pushed out of the frightening fifth dimension with a sudden, immediate jerk. And there she was, herself again, standing with Calvin beside her, holding onto her hand for dear life, and Charles Wallace in front of her, looking indignant. Ms. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch were not visible, but she knew they were there. The fact of their presence was strong about her. "Children, I apologize," came Mrs. Witch's voice. "Now, Charles, calm down," Ms. Whatsit said, appearing not as the great and beautiful beast she had been when they last saw her, but in her familiar wild garb of shawls and scarves and the old tramp's coat and hat. "You know how difficult it is for her to materialize, and if you are not substantial yourself, it's very difficult to realize how limiting protoplasm is." "I am sorry." Miss Witch's voice came again, but there was more than a hint of amusement in it. "It was not funny." Charles Wallace gave a childish stamp of his foot. Mrs. Who's glasses shone out, and the rest of her appeared more slowly behind them. "We are such stuff as dreams are made of." She smiled broadly. "Prospero in the Tempest. I do like that play." "You didn't do it on purpose?" Charles demanded. "Oh, my darling, of course not." Ms. Whatsit said quickly. "It was just a very understandable mistake. It's very difficult for Mrs. Witch to think in a corporeal way. She wouldn't hurt you deliberately, you know that, and really it's a very pleasant little planet, and it's rather amusing to be flat. We always enjoy our visits there." "Well, where are we now then?" Charles Wallace demanded, "and why?" "We're in Orion's belt. We have a friend here, and we want you to have a look at your own planet." "Well, when are we going home?" Meg said anxiously. "What about Mother? What about the twins? They'll be terribly worried about us when we didn't come in at bedtime. Well, Mother must be frantic by now. She and the twins and Fort will have been looking and looking for us, and of course we aren't there to be found." "Now, don't worry, my pet," Ms. Whatsit said cheerfully. "We took care of that before we left. Your mother has had enough to worry about with her, worry her with you and Charles Wallace to cope with, and not knowing about your father without adding to her anxiety. And so we took a time wrinkle as well as a space wrinkle. It's very easy to do if you just know how." "What do you mean?" Meg asked plaintively. Please, Mrs. Wetsit, it's all so confusing. Just relax and don't worry over things that needn't trouble you, Miss Wetsit said. We made a nice, tidy little time tesser, and unless something goes terribly wrong, we'll have you back about 5 minutes before you left. So there'll be no time to spare, and no one ever need know you were gone at all. Though, of course, you'll be telling your mother, dear lamb, that she is, and if something goes terribly wrong, it won't matter whether we get back at all. Don't frighten them, Mrs. Witch's voice came. Are you losing faith? Oh, no, I'm not. But Meg thought her voice sounded a little faint. I hope this is a nice planet, Calvin said. We can't see much of it. Does it ever clear up? Meg looked around her, realizing that she had been so breathless from the journey and the stop on the two-dimensional planet that she had not noticed her surroundings. And perhaps this was not very surprising. For the main thing about the surrounding was exactly that they were unnoticeable. They seemed to be standing on some sort of nondescript flat surface, and the air around them was gray. I mean, it wasn't exactly fog, but she could see nothing through it. Visibility was limited to the nicely definite bodies of Charles Wallace and Calvin, and the rather unbelievable bodies of Mrs. Wetsit and Mrs. Who, and a very faint occasional glimmer that was Mrs. Witch. Come, children, Miss Wetsit said. You don't have far to go, and we might as well walk. It will do you good to stretch your legs a little. And as they moved through the grayness, Meg caught an occasional glimpse of slag-like rocks. But there were no traces of trees or bushes, nothing but flat ground under their feet, no sign of any vegetation at all. And finally, ahead of them loomed what seemed to be a hill of stone, and as they approached it, Meg could see that there was an entrance that led deep into a deep, dark cavern. Are we going in there? Don't be afraid, Miss Wetsit said. It's easier for the happy medium to work within. Oh, and you'll like her, children. She's very jolly. If I ever saw her looking unhappy, I would be very depressed myself. As long as she can laugh, I'm sure everything is going to come out right in the end. Mrs. Wetsit, came Mrs. Witch's voice severely, just because you are very young is no excuse for talking too much. Mrs. Wetsit looked hurt, but she subsided. Just how old are you? Calvin asked her. Just a moment, Ms. Wetsit murmured, and appeared to calculate rapidly on her fingers, and she nodded triumphantly. Oh, gosh. Exactly 2,375,152,497 years, 8 months, and 3 days. And that is according to your calendar, of course, which even you know isn't very accurate. And she leaned closer to Meg and Calvin and whispered, it was a really great honor for me to be chosen for this mission. It's just because of my verbalizing and my materializing so well, you know. But of course, we can't take any credit for our talents. It's just how we use them that counts. And I make far too many mistakes. And that's why Mrs. Who and I enjoyed seeing Ms. Witch make a mistake when she tried to land you on a two-dimensional planet. It was that we were laughing at, not you. I mean, she was laughing at herself, you see. She's really terribly nice to us younger ones. Meg was listening with such interest to what Ms. Wetsit was saying that she hardly noticed when we got into the cave. The transition from the grayness of outside to the grayness of inside was almost unnoticeable. She saw a flickering light ahead of them and down, and it was towards this that they went, and they drew closer. And as they drew closer, she realized that it was a fire. It gets very cold in here, Ms. Wetsit said, so we asked her to have a good bonfire going for you. And as they approached the fire, they could see a dark shadow against it. And as they went closer still, they could see that the shadow was a woman. And she wore a turban of beautiful pale mauve silk and a long flowing purple satin gown. And in her hands was a crystal ball into which she was gazing raptly. She did not appear to see the children, Mrs. Wetsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch, but continued to stare into the crystal ball. And as she stared, she began to laugh. And she laughed and laughed at whatever it was that she was seeing. Mrs. Witch's voice rang out clear and strong, echoing against the walls of the cavern, and the words fell with a sonorous clang. "We are here." And the woman looked up from the ball, and when she saw them, she got up and curtsied uh, uh, deeply. Mrs. Whatsit and Mrs. Who dropped small curtsies in return, and the Shimmer seemed to bow slightly. "Oh, medium dear," Ms. Whatsit said, "these are the children, Charles Wallace Murray." Charles Wallace bowed. "Margaret Murray." Well, Meg felt that if Mrs. Whatsit and Mrs. Who had curtsied, she ought to, but she did so rather awkwardly. "And Calvin O'Keefe," and Calvin bobbed his head. "We want them to see their home planet," Ms. Whatsit said. The medium lost the delighted smile she had worn till then. "Oh, why must you make me look at unpleasant things when there are so many delightful ones to see?" Again, Mrs. Witch's voice reverberated through the cave. "There will no longer be so many pleasant things to look at if responsible people do not do something about the unpleasant ones." Now, I hate reading like this is really hard, but I'm just going to repeat that because I think this is very useful. Not so slowly. "There will no longer be so many pleasant things to look at if responsible people do not do something about the unpleasant ones." And I think that is a very good lesson. So the medium sighed and held the ball high. "Look, children," Miss Whatsit said, "look into it well." "Que la terre est petite à qui la voit dessus." I don't do French. "How small is the earth to him who looks from heaven," Mrs. Who intoned musically. And Meg looked into the crystal ball, at first with caution and then with increasing eagerness, as she seemed to see an enormous sweep of darkness and empty space, and then galaxies swinging across it. And finally, they seemed to move in closer to one of the galaxies. "Your own Milky Way," Miss Whatsit whispered to Meg. And then they were headed directly to the center of the galaxy, and then they moved off to one side, and stars seemed to be rushing at them, and Meg flung her arms up over her face as though to ward off the blow. "Look," Mrs. Witch commanded. And Meg dropped her arm, and they seemed to be moving in toward a planet. She thought she could make out polar ice caps. Everything seemed sparkling and clear. "No, no, medium dear, that's Mars," Mrs. Whatsit reproved gently. "Do I have to?" the medium asked. "Now," Mrs. Witch commanded, and the bright planet moved out of their vision, and for a moment there was darkness of space, and then another planet, and then the outlines of this planet were not clean and clear, and it seemed to be covered with a smoky haze. And through the haze, Meg thought she could make out the familiar outlines of continents, like pictures in her social studies books. "Is it because of our atmosphere that we can't see properly?" she asked anxiously. "No, Meg. You know that it is not the atmosphere," Mrs. Witch said. "You must be brave." "It's the thing," Charles Wallace cried. "It's the dark thing we saw from the mountain peak on Uriel when we were riding on Miss Whatsit's back." "Did it just come?" Meg asked in agony, unable to keep her eyes from the sickness of the shadow that darkened the beauty of the earth. "Did it just come while we've been gone?" Mrs. Witch's voice seemed very tired. "Tell her," she said to Miss Whatsit, and Miss Whatsit sighed. "No, Meg, it hasn't just come. It has been there for a great many years, and that is why your planet is such a troubled one." "But why?" Calvin started to ask. his voice croaking hoarsely. Mrs. Whatsit raised her hand to silence him. We've showed you the dark thing on Uriel first. Oh, for many reasons. First, because the atmosphere on the mountain peaks there is so clear and thin that you can see it for what it is. And we thought it would be easier for you to understand it if you saw it, well, someplace else first, not on your own earth. I hate it, said Charles Wallace passionately. I hate the dark thing. And Miss Whatsit nodded. Yes, Charles dear, we all do. And that's another reason we wanted to prepare you on Uriel. We thought it would be too frightening for you to see it first of all about your own beloved world. But what is it? Calvin demanded. We know that it's evil, but what is it? You have said it. Mrs. Witch's voice rang out. It is evil. It is the powers of darkness. But what's going to happen? Meg's voice trembled. Oh, please, Mrs. Witch, tell us what's going to happen. We will continue to fight. Something in Mrs. Witch's voice made all three children stand straighter, throwing their shoulders back with determination and looking at the glimmer that was Miss Witch with pride and confidence. And we're not alone, you know, children, came to Mrs. Whatsit, the comforter. All through the universe is being fought, all through the cosmos, and but is a grand and exciting battle. I know it's hard for you to understand about size and how there's very little difference in the size of the tiniest microbe in the greatest galaxy. And you think about that, and maybe it won't seem strange to you that some of our very best fighters have come right from your own planet. And it's a little planet, dears, out on the edge of a little galaxy. You can be proud that it has done so well. Well, who have our fighters been? Calvin asked. Oh, you must know them, dear, Miss Whatsit said. Mrs. Who's spectacles shone out at them triumphantly, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Jesus, what Charles Wallace said. Why, of course, Jesus. Well, of course, Miss Whatsit said. Go on, Charles Love. There were others. All your great artists. They have been lights for us to see by. Leonardo da Vinci, Calvin suggested tentatively, and Michelangelo. And Shakespeare, Charles Wallace called out, and Bach, and Pasteur, maybe not Pasteur, and Madame Curie. I don't know about that. And Einstein, I'm not sure about those guys. And now Calvin's voice rang with confidence, and Schweitzer, and Gandhi, and Buddha, and Beethoven, and Rembrandt, and St. Francis. So we might have a different list, but who knows? Okay, now you, Meg, Miss Whatsit ordered. Oh, Euclid, I suppose. Meg was in such agony of impatience that her voice grated irritably in Copernicus. But what about Father? Please, what about Father? We are going to your father, Miss Witch said. But where is he? Meg went over to Mrs. Witch and stamped as though she was as young as Charles Wallace. Mrs. Whatsit answered in a voice that was low but quite firm. On a planet that has given in. So you must prepare and be very strong. All traces of cheer had left the happy medium's face, and she sat holding the great ball and looking at the shadowed earth, and a slow tear coursed down her cheek. I can't stand it any longer, she sobbed. Watch now, children, watch. And so this is chapter 6, The Happy Medium. And again, they focused their eyes on the crystal ball, and the earth with its fearful covering of dark shadows swam out of view, and they moved rapidly through the Milky Way. And there was the thing again. Watch, the medium told them, and the darkness seemed to seethe and writhe. Was this meant to comfort them? And suddenly there was a great burst of light through the darkness, and the light spread out, and where it touched, the darkness disappeared, and the light spread until the patch of the dark thing had vanished, and there was only a gentle shining, and through the shining came the stars clear and pure. And then slowly, shining dwindled until it too was gone, and there was nothing but stars and starlight. No shadows, no fear, only the stars and the clear darkness of space, quite different from the fearful darkness of the thing. You see, the medium cried, smiling happily, it can overcome. It's being overcome all the time. Ms. Whatsit sighed, a sigh so sad that Meg wanted to put her arms around her and comfort her. Tell us what exactly happened then, please, Charles said in a small voice. Well, it was a star, Miss Whatsit said sadly, a star giving up its life in a battle with the thing. It won. Oh, yes, my children, it won. But it lost its life in the winning. And Mrs. Witch spoke again. Her voice sounded tired, and they knew that speaking was a tremendous effort for her. It was not so long ago for you, was it? She asked gently, and Ms. Whatsit shook her head. And Charles Wallace went up to Mrs. Whatsit. I see, now I understand. You were a star once too, weren't you? And Mrs. Whatsit covered her face with her hands as though she were embarrassed and nodded. And you did what that star just did. And with her face still covered, Mrs. Whatsit nodded again. And Charles Wallace looked at her very solemnly. I should like to kiss you. And Mrs. Whatsit took her hands down from her face and pulled Charles Wallace to her in a quick embrace, and he put his arms about her neck and pressed his cheek against hers and then kissed her. And Meg felt that she should have liked to kiss Miss Whatsit too, but that after Charles Wallace, anything that she or Calvin did or said would be an anticlimax. And so she contented herself with looking at Miss Whatsit, even though she was used to Miss Whatsit's odd getup, and the very oddness of it was what made it seem so comforting. And she realized with a fresh shock that it was not Miss Whatsit herself that she was seeing at all. The complete, true Mrs. Whatsit, Meg realized, was beyond human understanding. What she saw was only the game Mrs. Whatsit was playing. It was an amusing and charming game, a game full of laughter and comfort, but it was only the tiniest facet of all the things Miss Whatsit could be. I didn't mean to tell you, Miss Whatsit faltered. I didn't mean to ever let you know, but oh, my dears, I did so love being a star. You are still very young, Ms. Witch said, her voice faintly chiding. The medium sat looking happily at the star-filled sky and her ball, smiling and nodding and chuckling gently. But Meg noticed that her eyes were drooping, and suddenly her head fell forward and she gave a faint snore. Poor thing, Ms. Whatsit said. We've worn her out. It's very hard work for her. Please, Ms. Whatsit, Meg asked, what happens now? Why are we here? What do we do next? Where's father? I mean, when are we going to him? And she clasped her hands pleadingly. One thing at a time, my love, Ms. Whatsit said, and Mrs. Who cut in. As paredes tem ouvidos. That's Portuguese. Walls have ears. Yes, let's go outside, Miss Whatsit said. Come, we'll let her sleep. But as they turned to go, the medium jerked her head up and smiled at them radiantly. You weren't going to go without saying goodbye to me, were you? She asked. Oh, we thought we'd just let you sleep, dear. Miss Whatsit patted the medium's shoulder. We worked you terribly hard, and we know you must be very tired. But I was going to give you some ambrosia or nectar, or at least some tea. At this, Meg realized that she was hungry. I mean, how much time had passed since they'd had their bowls of stew, she wondered. But Ms. Whatsit said, oh, thank you, dear, but I think we'd better be going. They don't need to eat, you know, Charles Wallace whispered to Meg, at least not food the way we do. Eating's just a game with them. As soon as we get organized again, I'd better remind them that they have to feed us sooner or later. The medium smiled and nodded. It does seem as though I should be able to do something nice for you after having had to show those poor children such horrid things. Would they like to see their mother before they go? Could we see father? Meg asked eagerly. No, Ms. Witch said. We are going to your father, Meg. Do not be impatient. But she could see her mother, couldn't she? The medium wheedled. Oh, why not? Ms. Whatsit put in. It won't take long and it can't do any harm. And Calvin too? Could Calvin see his mother too? Calvin touched Meg in a quick gesture, and whether it was of thanks or apprehension, she was not sure. I think it is a mistake, Ms. Witch said disapprovingly. But since you have mentioned it, I suppose you must go ahead. I hate it when she gets cross, Miss Wetsit said, glancing over at Ms. Witch. And the trouble is, she always seems to be right, but I really don't see how it could hurt. It might make you all feel better. Go on, medium dear. And the medium, smiling and humming softly, turned the crystal ball a little between her hands. Stars, comets, planets flashed through the sky, and the earth came into view again, the darkened earth, closer, closer, till it filled the globe, and she had somehow gone through the darkness until the soft white of clouds and the gentle outline of continents shone clearly. Calvin's mother first, Meg whispered to the medium. And the globe became hazy and cloudy, and then shadows began to solidify, clarify, and they were looking into an untidy kitchen with a sink full of unwashed dishes, and in front of the sink stood an unkempt woman with gray hair stringing about her face. Her mouth was open, and Meg could see the toothless gums, and it seemed that she could almost hear her screaming at two small children standing nearby. And then she grabbed a long wooden spoon from the sink and began whacking one of the children. "Oh dear," the medium murmured, and the picture began to dissolve. "I didn't really—" "It's all right," Calvin said in a low voice. I think I'd rather you knew." And now, instead of reaching to Calvin for safety, Meg took his hand in hers, not saying anything in words, but trying to tell him by the pressure of her fingers what she felt. If anyone had told her only the day before that she, Meg, the snaggle-toothed, myopic, clumsy one, would be taking a boy's hand to offer him comfort and strength, particularly a popular and important boy like Calvin, the idea would have been beyond comprehension. But now it seemed as natural to want to help and protect Calvin as it did Charles Wallace. The shadows were swirling in the crystal again, and as they cleared, Meg began to recognize her mother's lab at home. Mrs. Murray was sitting perched on her high stool, writing away at a piece of paper on a clipboard in her lap. She's writing father, Meg thought. That's what she always does every night. And the tears that she could never learn to control swam to her eyes as she watched. Mrs. Murray looked up from her letter, almost as though she were looking toward the children, and then her head drooped and she put it down to the paper and sat there, huddled up, letting herself relax into an unhappiness that she never allowed her children to see. And now the desire for tears left Meg, the hot, protective anger that she had felt for Calvin when she looked into home, and she now felt turned toward her mother. "Let's go," she cried harshly. "Let's do something." "She's always so right," Ms. Wetsit murmured, looking towards Mrs. Witch. "Sometimes I wish she'd just say, 'I told you so,' and have done with it." "I only meant to help," the medium wailed. "Oh, medium dear, don't feel badly," Mrs. Wetsit said swiftly. "Look at something cheerful, do. I can't bear to have you so distressed." "It's all right," Meg assured the medium earnestly. "Truly it is, Ms. Medium, and we thank you very much." "Are you sure?" the medium asked, brightening. "Of course. It really helped ever so much because it made me mad, and when I'm mad, I don't have room to be scared." "Well, kiss me goodbye for good luck, then," the medium asked, and Meg went over and gave her a quick kiss, and so did Charles Wallace, and the medium looked smilingly at Calvin and winked. "I want the young man to kiss me too. I always did love red hair, and it'll give you good luck, laddie me love." And Calvin bent down, blushing, and awkwardly kissed his cheek. And the medium tweaked his nose. "You've got a lot to learn, my boy," she told him. "Now goodbye, medium dear, and many thanks," Ms. Wetsit said. "I dare say we'll see you in an eon or two." "Well, where are we going in case I want to tune in?" the medium asked. "Camazotz," Mrs. Wetsit told her. Where and what was Camazotz? Meg did not like the sound of that word the way in which Ms. Wetsit pronounced it. "But please don't distress yourself on our behalf. You know you don't like looking in on the dark planets, and it's very upsetting to us when you aren't happy." "But I must know what happens to the children," the medium said. "It's my worst trouble, getting fond. And if I didn't get fond, I couldn't be happy all the time." Oh, well, ho hum. I managed to keep pretty jolly, and a little snooze will do wonders for me right now. Goodbye, every. And her words got lost in the general bzz of snore. Come, Mrs. Witch ordered, and they followed her out of the darkness of the cave to the impersonal grayness of the medium's planet. Now, children, you must not be frightened at what is going to happen, Mrs. Witch warned. Stay angry, little Meg, Miss Whatsit whispered. You will need all your anger now. And without warning, Meg was swept into nothingness again, and this time the nothingness was interrupted by a feeling of clammy coldness, such as she had never felt before. The coldness deepened and swirled all around her and through her, and was filled with a new and strange kind of darkness that was a completely tangible thing, a thing that wanted to eat and digest her like some enormous malignant beast of prey. And then the darkness was gone. Had it been the shadow, the black thing? Had they had to travel through it to get to her father? There was the by now familiar tingling in hands and feet, and the push through the hardness, and she was on her feet, breathless but unharmed, standing beside Calvin and Charles Wallace. Is this Camazotz? Charles Wallace asked as Mrs. Whatsit materialized in front of him. Yes, she answered. And now let us just stand and get our breath and look around. They were standing on a hill, and as Meg looked about her, she felt that it could easily be a hill on earth. There were the familiar trees she knew so well at home, birches, pines, and maples. And though it was warmer than it had been when they so precipitously left the apple orchard, there was also a faintly autumnal touch to the air. Near them, there were several small trees with reddened leaves, much like sumac, and a big patch of goldenrod-like flowers. And she looked down the hill, and she could see the smokestacks of a town. And it might have been one of any number of familiar towns, and there seemed to be nothing strange or different or frightening in the landscape. But Mrs. Whatsit came to her and put an arm around her comfortingly. I can't stay with you here now, love, she said. You three children will be on your own, and we will be near you, and we will be watching you, but we will not be able to see us or ask us for help, and we will not be able to come to you. But is father here? Meg asked tremblingly. Yes. But where? When will we see him? And she was poised for running as though she were going to sprint off immediately to wherever her father was. That I cannot tell you. You will just have to wait until a propitious moment. Charles Wallace looked steadily at Mrs. Whatsit. Are you afraid for us? A little. But if you weren't afraid to do what you did when you were a star, why should you be afraid for us now? Well, but I was afraid, Miss Whatsit said gently, and she looked steadily at each of the three children in turn. You will need help, she told them, but all I am allowed to give you is a little talisman. Calvin, your great gift is your ability to communicate with all kinds of people. So for you, I will strengthen this gift. And Meg, I will give you your faults. My faults? Meg cried. Your faults. But I'm always trying to get rid of my faults. Yes, Miss Whatsit said. However, I think you will find they will come in very handy on Camazotz. And Charles Wallace, to you I can give only the resilience of your childhood. And from somewhere, Mrs. Who's glasses glimmered, and they heard her voice saying, Calvin, she said, a hint. For you, a hint. Listen well. For that he was a spirit, too delicate, to act their earthy and abhorred commands. Refusing their grand hests, they did confine him by the help of their most potent ministers, and in their most unmitigable rage, into a cloven pine, within which rift, imprisoned, he didst painfully remain. Shakespeare, The Tempest. Where are you, Mrs. Who? Charles Wallace asked. Where is Mrs. Witch? We cannot come to you now. Mrs. Hu's voice blew out to them like the wind. Allwissend bin ich nicht, doch viel ist mir bewusst. Goethe. I do not know everything, still many things I understand. This is for you, Charles. Remember that you do not know everything. And then the voice was directed to Meg. To you, I leave my glasses, little blind as a bat, but do not use them except as a last resort. Save them for the final moment of peril. And as she spoke, there was another shimmer of spectacles, and then it was gone, and the voice faded out, and the spectacles were in Meg's hand. And she put them carefully into the breast pocket of her jacket, and the knowledge that they were somehow made her there. And the knowledge that they were there somehow made her a little less afraid. To all three of you, I give my command, Ms. Witch said. Go down into the town. Go together. Do not let them separate you. Be strong. And there was a flicker, and then it vanished, and Meg shivered. Mrs. Wetsit must have seen the shiver, for she patted Meg on the shoulder, and then she turned to Calvin. Take care of Meg. I can take care of Meg, Charles Wallace said rather sharply. I always have. And Miss Wetsit looked at Charles Wallace, and the creaky voice seemed somehow both to soften and deepen at the same time. Charles Wallace, the danger here is greatest for you. Why? Because of what you are. Just exactly because of what you are, you will be by far the most vulnerable. You must stay with Meg and Calvin. You must not go off on your own. Beware of pride and arrogance, Charles, for they may betray you. And the tone of Miss Wetsit's voice, both warning and frightening, Meg shivered again, and Charles Wallace butted up against Miss Wetsit in the way he often did with his mother, whispering, Now I think I know what you meant about being afraid. Only a fool is not afraid, Miss Wetsit told him. Now go. And where she had been, there was only a sky and grasses and a small rock. Come on, Meg said impatiently. Come on, let's go. She was completely unaware that her voice was trembling like an aspen leaf, and she took Charles Wallace and Calvin each by the hand and started down the hill. Below them, the town was laid out in harsh, angular patterns. The houses on the outskirts were all exactly alike, small square boxes painted gray, and each had a small rectangular plot of lawn in front, with a straight line of dull-looking flowers edging the path to the door. Meg had a feeling that if she could count the flowers, there would be exactly the same number for each house. In front of all the houses, children were playing. Some were skipping rope, some were bouncing balls, and Meg felt vaguely that something was wrong with their play. It seemed exactly like children playing around any housing development at home, and yet there was something different about it. She looked at Calvin and saw that he, too, was puzzled. Look, Charles Wallace said suddenly, they're skipping and bouncing in rhythm. Everyone's doing it at exactly the same moment. And this was so. As the skipping rope hit the pavement, so did the ball. And as the rope curved over the head of the jumping child with the ball caught the ball. And down came the ropes, and down came the balls, over and over again. Up, down, all in rhythm, all identical, like the houses, like the paths, like the flowers. And then the doors of all the houses opened simultaneously, and out came women like a row of paper dolls. And the print of their dresses was different, but they all gave the appearance of being the same. Each woman stood on the steps of her house. Each clapped. Each child with a ball caught the ball. Each child with a skipping rope folded the rope. Each child turned and walked into the house. The doors clicked shut behind them. How can they do that? Meg asked wonderingly. We couldn't do that if we tried. What does it mean? Let's go back. Calvin's voice was urgent. Back? Charles Wallace said. Where? I don't know. Anywhere. Back to the hill. Back to Miss Wetsit. Back to Miss Who. Back to Miss Witch. I don't like this. But they aren't there. I mean, do you think they'd come to us if we turned back now? I don't like it, Calvin said. Come on, impatience made Meg squeak. You know we can't go back. Miss Witch said to go into town. And she started down the street, and the two boys followed her. The houses, all identical, continued as far as the eye could reach. And then all at once they saw the same thing and stopped to watch. In front of one of the houses stood a little boy with a ball, and he was bouncing it. But he bounced it rather badly, with no particular rhythm, and sometimes dropping it and running after it with awkward, furtive leaps, and sometimes throwing it up in the air and trying to catch it. And the door of his house opened, and out ran one of the mother figures, and she looked wildly up and down the street and saw the children and put her hand to her mouth as though to stifle a scream, and grabbed the little boy and rushed indoors with him, and the ball dropped from his fingers and rolled out into the street. Charles ran after it and picked it up, holding it out for Meg and Calvin to see. It seemed like a perfectly ordinary brown rubber ball. Let's take it to him and see what happens, Charles Wallace suggested. And Meg pulled at him. Ms. Witch said for us to go into town. Well, we are in town, aren't we? I mean, the outskirts anyhow. I want to know more about this. I have a hunch it may help us later. You go on if you don't want to come with me. No, Calvin said firmly. We are going to stay together. Ms. Wetz had said we weren't to let them separate us. But I'm with you on this. Let's knock and see what happens. They went up the path to the house. Meg was reluctant, eager to get into town. Let's hurry, please. Don't you want to find Father? Yes, said Charles Wallace, but not blindly. How can we help him if we don't even know what we're up against? And it's obvious we've been brought here to help him, not just to find him. And so we walked briskly up the steps and knocked on the door. And they waited, and nothing happened. And then Charles Wallace saw a bell, and this he rang. And then they could hear the bell buzzing in the house, and the sound of it echoed down the street. And after a moment, the mother figure opened the door. And all up and down the street, the other doors opened, but only a crack. And the eyes peered out at the three children, and the woman looking fearfully out the door at them. What do you want? She asked. It isn't paper time yet, and we've had milk time. And we've had this month's pull or push person, and I've given my decency donations regularly, and all my papers are in order. I think your little boy dropped his ball, Charles Wallace said, holding it out. The woman pushed the ball away. Oh, no, the children in our section never drop balls. They're all perfectly trained. We haven't had an aberration for 3 years. All up and down the block, heads nodded in agreement. And Charles Wallace moved closer to the woman and looked past her into the house. And behind her, in the shadows, he could see the little boy, who must have been about his own age. You can't come in, the woman said. You haven't shown me any papers, and I don't have to let you in if you haven't any papers. Charles Wallace held the ball out beyond the woman so that the little boy could see it, and quick as a flash, the boy leaped forward and grabbed the ball from Charles Wallace's hands and then darted back into the shadows. And the woman went very white and opened her mouth as if to say something, and then slammed the door in their faces instead. And all up and down the street, doors slam, 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 slam. What are they afraid of? Charles Wallace asked. What's the matter with them? Don't you know? Meg asked him. Don't you know what this is all about, Charles? Not yet, Charles Wallace said. Not even an inkling, and I'm trying. But it didn't get through anywhere. I mean, not even a chink. Let's go. And he stumped down the steps. And after several blocks, the houses gave way to apartment buildings. At least Meg felt sure that's what they must be. I mean, they were fairly tall, rectangular buildings, absolutely plain. Each window, each entrance exactly like every other. And then coming toward them down the street was a boy about Calvin's age, riding a machine that was something like a combination of a bicycle and a motorcycle. It had the slimness and the lightness of a bicycle, and yet the foot pedals turned. They seemed to generate an unseen source of power, so that the boy could pedal very slowly and yet move along the street quite swiftly. And as he reached each entrance, he thrust one hand into a bag he wore over his shoulder and pulled out a roll of papers and tossed it at the entrance. It might have been Dennis or Sandy or any one of the hundreds of boys with newspaper route in any one of hundreds of towns back home. And yet, as with the children playing ball and jumping rope, there was something wrong about it. Like, the rhythm of the gesture never varied. The paper flew in identically the same arc. Every doorway landed identically in the same spot. And it was impossible for anyone to throw with such consistent perfection. Calvin whistled. I wonder if they play baseball here. And as the boy saw them, he slowed down on the machine and stopped, his hand arrested as he was about to plunge it into the paper bag. What are you kids doing out on the street? He demanded. Only root boys are allowed out now. You know that. No, we don't know it, Charles Wallace said. We're strangers here. How about telling us about this place? You mean you've had your entrance papers processed and everything? The boy asked. You must have if you're here, he answered himself. And what are you doing here if you don't know about us? You tell me. Are you examiners? The boy asked a little anxiously. Everybody knows our city has the best central intelligence center on the planet. Our production levels are the highest. Our factories never close. Our machines never stop rolling. Added to this, we have 5 poets, 1 musician, 3 artists, and 6 sculptors, all perfectly channeled. What are you quoting from? Charles Wallace asked. The manual, of course, the boy said. We are the most oriented city on the planet. There's been no trouble of any kind for centuries. All Camazotz knows our record. That is why we are the capital city of Camazotz. That is why CENTRAL Central Intelligence is located here. That's why IT makes IT's home here. And there was something about the way he said IT that made a shiver run up and down Meg's spine. But Charles Wallace asked briskly, well, where is this Central Intelligence Center of yours? CENTRAL, Central, the boy corrected. Just keep going and you can't miss it. You are strangers, aren't you? What are you doing here? Are you supposed to ask questions? Charles Wallace demanded severely. And the boy went white, just as the woman had. I humbly beg your pardon. I must continue my route now, or I will have to talk my timing into the explainer. And he shot off down the street on his machine. Charles Wallace stared after him. What is it? He asked Meg and Calvin. There is something funny about the way he talked, as though he weren't really doing the talking. You know what I mean? Calvin nodded thoughtfully. Funny is right. Funny, peculiar. Not only the way he talked either, that whole thing smells. Come on, Meg pulled at them. How many times was it she had urged them on? Let's go find Father. He'll be able to explain it all to us. And they walked on, and after several more blocks, they began to see other people, grown-up people, not children, walking up and down and across the streets. These people ignored the children entirely, seemed to be completely intent on their own businesses. Some of them went into the apartment buildings. Some of them were headed in the same direction as the children. And as these people came to the main street from the sides, they would swing around the corners with an odd, automatic stride, as though they were so deep in their own problems and the route was so familiar that they didn't have to pay any attention to where they were going. And after a while, the apartment buildings gave way to what must have been office buildings, great stern structures with enormous entrances, and men and women with briefcases poured in and out. And Charles Wallace went up to one of the women, saying politely, "Excuse me, but could you please tell me?" But she hardly glanced at him as she continued on her way. Look, Meg pointed. Ahead of them, across the square, was the largest building they had ever seen, higher than the Empire State Building and almost as long as it was high. That must be it, Charles Wallace said. It's their CENTRAL, Central Intelligence, or whatever it is. Let's go in. But if Father's in some kind of trouble with this planet, Meg objected, isn't this exactly where we shouldn't go? Well, then how do you propose finding him? Charles Wallace demanded. I certainly wouldn't ask there. Well, I didn't say anything about asking, but we aren't going to have the faintest idea where or how to look for him until we find out something about this place. And I have a hunch that that's the place to start. If you have a better idea, Meg, why, of course, just say so. Oh, get down off your high horse, Meg said crossly. Let's go over to your old CENTRAL Central Intelligence and get it over with. I think we ought to have passports or something, Calvin suggested. This is much more than leaving America to go to Europe, and that boy and that woman both seem to care so much about having everything in proper order. We certainly haven't got any papers in proper order. Well, if we needed passports or papers, Miss Whatsit would have told us, Charles Wallace said. Calvin put his hands on his hips and looked down at Charles Wallace. Now look here, old sport. I love those 3 old girls just as much as you do, but I'm not sure they know everything. Well, they know a lot more than we do. Granted, but you know Ms. Whatsit talked about having been a star, and I wouldn't think that being a star would give her much practice in knowing about people. And when we tried to be a person, she came pretty close to goofing it up, and there was never anybody on land or sea like Ms. Whatsit the way she got herself up. Well, she was just having fun. If she'd wanted to look like you or Meg, I'm sure she could have. Well, Calvin shook his head. I'm not so sure. And these people seem to be people, if you know what I mean. I mean, they aren't like us. I'll grant you there's something very offbeat about them, but they're lots more like ordinary people than the ones on Uriel. Do you suppose they're robots? Meg suggested. And Charles Wallace shook his head. No, that boy who dropped the ball, he wasn't any robot. And I don't think the rest of them are either. Let me listen for a minute. And they stood very still, side by side, in the shadow of one of the big office buildings. 6 large doors kept swinging open, shut, as people went in and out, looking straight ahead, and paying no attention to the children whatsoever. And Charles wore his listening, probing look. They're not robots, he said suddenly and definitively. I'm not sure what they are, but they're not robots. I can feel minds here. I can get at them. I can't get at them at all, but I can feel there's some sort of pulsing. Let me try a minute more. And the 3 of them stood very quietly, and the doors kept opening and shutting, and the stiff people hurried in and out, walking jerkily like figures in an old silent movie. And then abruptly, the stream of movement thinned, and there were only a few people, and those moved more rapidly, as if the film had been sped up. One white-faced man in a dark suit looked directly at the children. Oh dear, I shall be late, and flickered into the building. He's like the White Rabbit, Meg giggled nervously. I'm scared, Charles said. I can't reach them at all. I'm completely shut out. We have to find Father, Meg started again. Meg. Charles Wallace's eyes were wide and frightened. I'm not sure I'll even know Father. It's been so long, and I was only a baby. Meg's reassurance came quickly. Oh, you'll know him. Of course you'll know him. The way you know me, even without looking, because I'm always there for you. You can always reach in and... Yes, Charles punched one small fist in an open palm. Let's go to Central Intelligence. And Calvin reached out and caught both Charles and Meg by the arm. You remember when we met, you asked me why I was there. And I told you it was because I had a compulsion, a feeling. I just had to come to that particular place at that particular moment. Yeah, sure. I've got another feeling. Not the same kind, a different one. A feeling that if we go into that building, we're going into terrible danger. All right. So that's our 2 chapters for tonight. So thank you for joining in. Besides the list of saviors are good fighters, which is a little disturbing, makes you kind of wonder where Madeline L'Engle was with all of that. I still think it's a good message. So there won't be many pretty things to look at if the responsible people don't do something. So to all the responsible people out there, good night. I bid you adieu.